I thought I'd be able to go an entire week without talking about Gibson, but alas, the world had other plans for me. As you may have heard, there are now Donald Trump branded Les Paul counterfeits out there. Yes, last week, I, along with many other people, read the news that there is a Trump guitar that looks not unlike a Les Paul with a rather gaudy bald eagle on it and all sorts of jingoistic garbage, and the number 45 on the headstock because he was the 45th president. I guess this is also so that they can put out another one with the 47 because he will be the 47th president. Now, the news all said Donald Trump is out there selling guitars. And it's a funny headline. It's not exactly true. Donald Trump is endorsing these guitars, which are sold by a company called 16 Guitars. Now, Gibson comes into play because Gibson, surprise, has issued a cease and desist letter against 16 Guitars because, the guitars appear to be infringing on Gibson's IP, specifically the general look of the Les Paul. One of the things that Gibson versus PRS said is that the general body shape is not able to be trademarked. It's too generic. However, the wiggle room is that these Les Pauls aren't just the outline. They also have the control layout. They have the toggle at the upper bout. They've got all of the hallmarks of the Les Paul body, whereas the McCarty had a slightly different body shape, and you could tell the difference. This is the spitting image. The only difference is the headstock shape is a little bit different, which I personally find surprising. If you're going to copy it all. Don't half-ass it. So Gibson issued the cease and desist letter, and they confirmed that to Guitar World magazine, saying that they had in fact done that. Now, as stated, Donald Trump is not behind this. He's not selling these guitars. He's endorsed these guitars, I would suspect, for money. That is his typical modus operandi. However, I don't know for a fact it was for money, and I'm not alleging that. I'm just saying that my personal thought, my personal suspicion is that, he's getting a kickback. I'm not saying he is getting a kickback, just that I'd be surprised if he's not getting a kickback. At the same time, also in the news, is that Customs and Border Patrol interdicted a shipment of 3,000 chipsins. They interdicted a shipment of 3,000 counterfeit Gibson Les Pauls. Now, we've discussed this before. How would Gibson go after an overseas counterfeiter? And the conclusion is Gibson themselves doesn't have to. That is why Customs and Border Patrol exists. Customs and Border Patrol interdicts the shipment, prevents it from coming into the country, thereby making sure that the seller basically eats a loss. Gibson doesn't have to spend needless money getting empty judgments against companies that aren't subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So, this is actually the system working properly. But here's one of the things that it brings up. It brings up a rather interesting point. Could the President of the United States legally counterfeit a Gibson Les Paul? Up until 2023, if you would ask me that question, I would say no, he legally cannot do that. But as we have learned this year, according to the Supreme Court, the President of the United States is immune from criminal prosecution for official acts undertaken as President of the United States. The famous hypothetical from the oral argument was, can the President order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Would the President of the United States be immune from criminal prosecution for undertaking that official act. And everyone thought, oh, well, no, he's not immune from criminal prosecution for that. That's clearly beyond what the framers of the Constitution could have intended. But the Supreme Court said otherwise, and yeah, it looks like the President of the United States is immune from criminal prosecution for official acts, which means that the President of the United States could officially order the U.S. Mint to counterfeit Gibson Les Pauls. Or President of the United States could officially order Customs and Border Patrol to stand down and allow the importation of counterfeit Gibson Les Pauls. He could do all sorts of things and be immune from criminal prosecution. But it doesn't just stop there, because the law that's being violated is everyone's favorite, say it with me, the Lanham Act. The Lanham Act is federal law, and the President of the United States, as the chief executive, is charged with the enforcement of those laws. So he could tell Attorney General Hulk Hogan not to prosecute anyone charged with a Lanham Act violation for counterfeiting Les Pauls. Yeah, I know that's a ridiculous hypothetical. There's no way in hell Hulk Hogan would be the Attorney General. Unless it comes to pass, in which case I'm sorry for bringing that into the world. Moreover, let's say Attorney General Hulk Hogan decided, you know what, I'm going to disobey President Trump and I'm going to prosecute him for Lanham Act violations. Well, he could just pardon himself because it's a federal law and the president can pardon federal crimes. And since the Constitution doesn't say the president can't pardon himself, I suspect that the Supreme Court, at least if Donald Trump was involved, would say that yes, President Donald Trump can pardon himself for the commission of any federal crimes previously or in the future committed. Additionally, the President of the United States could use the power of his office to do things like, say he wanted to get back at Gibson for prosecuting him for that. Well, he could issue an executive order saying no importing any rosewood except for Bolivian rosewood. That doesn't sound like a lot, except for the fact that Bolivian rosewood is not, botanically speaking, a true rosewood, and commercially is better known as Pau Ferro. Sounds ridiculous, except for the fact that a few years back, yes, Gibson was selling reissues with Bolivian rosewood. These ones are not as valuable on the market because they ultimately have Pau Ferro on them, meaning that they are somehow not historically accurate. Again, this seems ridiculous. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm just saying it's not outside the realm of possibility. On the other hand, he could do all sorts of other things. He could take us out of the treaty and allow the importation of all sorts of rosewood. He could say, you know what? It's okay to import Brazilian rosewood. I suspect that guitar manufacturers would love that. They might even donate to him for that. But that's okay. If it looks like a bribe, that's fine too, because the Supreme Court has addressed this, not with President Trump, but years ago with the former governor of the Commonwealth of Virginia, where the Supreme Court basically said, in order to prove bribery against an official, you need an actual quid pro quo. You need that official to say, yes, I am receiving this bag of money and I am taking this bag of money in exchange for an official act that I am going to do for you. In the McDonald case, the governor had received a Ferrari and he was driving around with it. He had also received several rather expensive watches in exchange for his endorsement of a pharmaceutical. And after being convicted, the Supreme Court said, well, the endorsement's not really an official act. Can't really prove that there was a quid pro quo. And because you haven't proven that, you haven't proven bribery. So yeah, if Gibson, if Fender, if PRS, if any of them wants to donate to Donald Trump, they can. Hell, if Donald Trump was to sell these guitars, just like he's somehow selling watches, which I don't believe he's actually selling, I think that's also another case of him endorsing the watch, well, go out, buy the watch, buy whatever product the president himself is selling at whatever price he names, and you'll get your official act in return. And the president would not be criminally prosecutable for it because it's an official act. And it appears that the Supreme Court said that, yeah, any official act undertaken by the president is immune from criminal prosecution, even theoretically ones he's bribed to do. So yeah, Gibson could bribe President Trump to allow the importation of Brazilian rosewood. Now, Gibson could be prosecuted. After all, they're not the president. They're not immune from prosecution. But then again, the president could pardon Gibson too. So we've got all sorts of opportunities for all sorts of chicanery. I love that word. It's a 10-cent word. I've been wanting to use it for so long. And now I have the opportunity. I'm sorry. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but yeah, that's where we're at. If you enjoyed this content, and I don't mean that you enjoy the fact that this is the world we live in, but rather this is the sort of content you want, please like, subscribe. Until next time, less fiddling, more playing.